On behalf, perfect. On behalf of the Food Depot, New Mexico First, and Presbyterian Healthcare Services, I welcome you to our discussion regarding the documentary Hungry to Learn, and specifically college food insecurity in New Mexico. I am Sherry Hooper, Executive Director of the Food Depot and President of the New Mexico Association of Food Banks. I am pleased to introduce my colleague, Dr. Sarita Kargas, a professor at the University of New Mexico. Later in our discussion, we will welcome representatives from other New Mexico food banks, including Nanette Pickney with Echo Food Bank, Diana Sprague with the Food Bank of Eastern New Mexico, and Mag Stripmatter with Roadrunner Food Bank. They will be with us to help answer your questions. I hope that you, our viewers this evening, have had the opportunity to view the documentary Hungry to Learn. If not, please find the link in the chat box. Dr. Kargas, the documentary begins with a really lovely scene of a beautiful college campus. The sun is shining, the grass is well manicured, and people are cheering on their college sports team. These are all images we have of college life. Yet after viewing the entire documentary, we realize that food insecurity for college students is prevalent, but not necessarily evident, that this is very much a hidden crisis.
Yep, this is a hidden crisis because students don't talk about the problem, for one thing, and our society does not discuss financial situations. We don't talk about our family income very much. College students especially are embarrassed to reveal their poverty and the food insecurity that results. So the research on food security only began about a decade ago, and the research faculty featured in this film, Sarah Goldrick Robb, initiated it. There's yet to be any data collected at the federal level. What we know comes from the compilation of data being collected from faculty teams across the country.
Well, in this documentary, they discuss students falling asleep in class, professors assuming that those students had partied the night before. And they also pointed out that there are some people who are skeptical of this crisis. What do you say to skeptics, Dr. Kargas?
Well, the skeptics are wrong because the data reveals otherwise. We know that there are literally tens of thousands of food insecure students. And food insecurity has 4 levels: secure, moderately food secure, low food security, and very low food security. This is a USDA categorization. But this last category, very low food security, has been called a euphemism for hungry. The low food secure students might rely more on junk food and less nutritious but cheaper food. However, the very low food secure students skip meals and experience hunger on a regular basis. And the impact of being food insecure includes health problems as well as academic problems. Food insecurity is correlated with weight loss or weight gain, lethargy, increased risk of diabetes, and more. A dance student told us in a focus group that she knew of students who had to drop out of the dance program because they didn't have enough nutrition and energy to keep them going. And of course, food insecurity correlates with weaker academic outcomes. Food insecure students are more likely to drop a class. After they've started it, they're more likely to stop out of school altogether.
And you and your team at the University of New Mexico completed a study called the UNM Basic Needs Research Project. What motivated your team to complete this project?
Well, with this first slide, I want to acknowledge that I am part of a team, actually 2 teams. We were just happened to be a group of women all concerned with what might be going on campus, and that we didn't really have any idea. My colleague, Mary Gold-Walsh-Dilley, a sociologist, she used to give out that USDA survey anonymously and would find food insecurity consistently in our small classes. But that was only anecdotal evidence. So we gathered a big team. We broke into 2 groups because we had one team that loved data and wanted to put their efforts into data collection. And the other team wanted to focus on taking steps to address food and housing insecurity, though that was the goal of all of us. Then the provost put together a steering committee, which is further looking at the problem with staff. Okay. So this slide reveals food and housing insecurity in the US and New Mexico in 2018, I believe. We use it to illustrate the fact that basic needs insecurity is worse among college students across the nation than it is in household hunger. In general and pre-pandemic, about 11% of US households are food insecure, while for college students, the prevalence is 30% pre-pandemic.
Well, and since the pandemic hit, we've seen those numbers climb in New Mexico. 1 in 5 New Mexicans are experiencing hunger now during this pandemic. And then the crisis is even more severe for our state's children. We're seeing that 1 in 3 children in New Mexico are hungry. New Mexico food banks have seen about a 30% increase in the number of people seeking help during the pandemic. In 2020, the food banks responded to pandemic hunger by providing food for more than 50 million meals, but we know the need continues. Now let's turn to the results of the Basic Needs Research Project.
We gave our quantitative survey in April of 2020, so just at the beginning of the pandemic, and we found 32% food insecurity among all students, and this included undergraduate, graduate, and professional students. The prevalence is highest in students of color and LGBTQIA students, as well as international students.
And in the documentary, students shared how being hungry consumes their thoughts. That's painful, and it affects them not only physically, but mentally and emotionally. One of the students I know talked about the moments of panic and anxiety she feels when she's thinking just about trying to meet all of her expenses. I know the food banks often see this with low-income families using the food banks and food pantries in New Mexico. They have shared similar issues about paying for basic needs, fixed expenses, and they rarely have money left over for food. They talk about choosing between paying for food or rent and food or utilities. But we know from this documentary that students are faced with the decision of purchasing food or staying in college. And it broke my heart, honestly, in the documentary when students were saying that sometimes it's just easier to give up and drop out.
Yeah. So back to the data a little bit, it's almost, look at that, 37% food insecurity. Almost 40% of our students are food insecure at UNM, and this was pre-pandemic. But the graduate students also had prevalence of food insecurity, law students, medical students. So nobody is immune to it. It's just the students who don't have generational wealth supporting them that are most likely to face food insecurity. And this is a problem because of the graduation rates. As you can see, UNM's 4-year graduation rates are low, 35%. That's not terribly uncommon, as most students take about 6 years to graduate in the US now. But even our 6-year graduation rate isn't that great. It's improved in recent years, pre-pandemic. But as one scholar has said, our nation's higher ed institutions are dropout factories. We would not accept this at the high school level. And this is a serious concern for New Mexico. Every time a single cohort of students doesn't graduate in the state, it loses millions in tax revenue, and the individual students, former students, lose out on income gains.
No, it's definitely not the experience most of us had in the 80s and 90s when we were in college. I know that young people are really under a lot of pressure to go to college. And in the documentary, I was struck by all of the barriers that students encounter trying to get their college education. And I know, Dr. Kargas, when you and I were talking about the documentary, you made mention that going to college takes courage.
Yeah, we should be impressed with these students. It takes courage because of the barriers they face that you and I probably didn't face. I'm the youngest of 6 kids, and there were 5 of us in college at once on my father's middle income salary in the 1980s. And my parents couldn't afford the tuition at St. John's College, where I attended, but I practically got a free ride thanks to financial aid at the time. Now you can see that Pell Grant used to cover 80% of attendance, and now it covers less than a third of tuition. Financial aid simply has not kept up with tuition. Student fees have increased, and state and federal contributions have gone down. And notice how student fees have increased. We recognize that it takes more than good instructors to get students a degree. We've invested a lot in staff to provide services through our various student centers. At UNM, we have the LGBTQIA Center, African American, El Centro, American Indian Center. But could we divert maybe some of that money that goes into athletics for meeting basic needs? Right now, UNM does not give money to our food pantry other than to allow it space.
Well, I know that food banks in New Mexico are working with colleges to set up food pantries. And I know we'll talk probably about that a little later. I know that at UNM, Roadrunner Food Bank has worked with you all to make sure that there's a food pantry set up, which we'll address later. But, I know that food pantries are really, and they meet an immediate need for the students that are hungry. And I noticed in the documentary that there were over 600 college campuses that have food pantries. But they also said in this documentary that those pantries don't solve hunger. And I'm going to disagree just a little bit with that, because I think those pantries can end hunger, and they end hunger for those students most immediately that day. But I do recognize that food pantries don't address the underlying problems. Clearly, we do have work to do to reach students on college campuses.
I would say that they really have a special, they do serve as an important bridge on college campuses. These are the students that are trying to hoist themselves into the middle class from the lower income, right? And this is a bridge that would help them raise themselves up. But our research does show, like other studies, when people use food pantries, they're embarrassed. And this is true for students too. They're hesitant to ask where it is and how it works. So not to mention right now that UNM's pantry has very short hours. We need to increase the hours. We need to probably have it open in the evenings and on Saturdays.
Well, you and your team, when you did the project, you proposed some solutions to college food insecurity. Would you take some time to share what solutions you've come up with?
Yes, and I have to give my students credit. They did a lot of this research. We looked at best practices across the country. Now, I think in the film they said there's about 600 college food pantries. It's now over 700. And they're doing different things, like some are setting up an Amazon account. So when people want to donate food, they can go to Amazon and see what the pantry is looking for and see what the students are asking for. I went to the pantry the other day and they said, students are asking for toothbrushes. Can you bring us toothbrushes next time? Can you bring us hand sanitizer? But we could set up an Amazon account to facilitate that. We need to help students access hot and prepared food. One student told another that, well, I just eat out of the can if I get it from the pantry. I don't have time. They might be on campus 8, 10, 12 hours a day. So helping students get access to hot food would also be helpful. People are establishing emergency grant funds. Sometimes students drop out of college because of a $200 car breakdown. What if we could give students less than $1,000 to make it through to graduation? We need to pay work study students more. We need to pay graduate assistants more. We've heard from graduate students complaining they're only allowed to work 10 hours a week, and it doesn't cover the bills. Or people in certain programs like med school aren't allowed to work. They don't have time to work. That makes life hard for them.
You and I discussed too when we were, when we were really talking about the documentary and our discussion today, and you said we need to change the message.
Right. And before that, I'm going to talk about this slide about doing more research. We need to also emphasize the importance of doing research. Before, we only had anecdotal evidence about food insecurity, but the quantitative data is really changing the conversation in New Mexico. And we need to deepen our understanding by doing focus groups and getting qualitative data. We also need to assess interventions, not only to ensure that they're effective, but to convince the university, administration, and legislators that interventions are worth investing in. Okay, so the message that needs to be changed, the bigger picture, getting at the deeper roots, is changing the norms. We need to normalize students seeking help, and we need to normalize universities offering help. We've normalized helping senior citizens with Social Security, for example. There's no stigma around that. But likewise, it should become normal for higher ed to assist students with their basic needs. And honors college faculty Megan Jacobs, who I think is here with us tonight, teaches fine arts. And she asked what one of her classes could do to contribute to the cause. And we said UNM needs destigmatizing messages about using the pantry and accessing SNAP benefits. And this is just a small sample of student creations that they're going to make available to us on campus. You'll see in the middle using that image of, oh, SNAP, to encourage students to use SNAP benefits. Research shows that about 57% of college eligible students don't access SNAP. And we need more students to use the pantry. We probably have about 6,000 food insecure students on campus, and maybe 1,000 used it last year. So we could increase that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm curious. We have many guests with us this evening, and you and we've gone through our presentation fairly quickly. I'd like to open it up. First of all, if there are questions that people have, but also I would be interested in hearing from people about how do we change that message? What do we say? What do we do? Do we have any questions ready? Yes. The first question, I will go to Dr. Kargas. Is there a difference in food insecurity for students who live in dorms on campus? And do the dorms still include food and dining plans?
There does seem to be some research that if students live on campus and if they have a dining plan, they are less food insecure. But it actually doesn't cure them of food insecurity, because students can pay for shorter plans that don't give them 21 meals a week or something. Mm-hmm. So there does seem to be some correlation that it is helpful to live on campus.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's a really good question, and it's that if you went to college, did you feel that it took courage for you to do so? And, you know, I'd like to open that up to some of our guests as well. If you want to let us know in the chat or raise your hand if you'd like to be a part of that. But I will share that it absolutely took courage for me to go to college. I was the first one in our family on either side to actually go to college. And I was terrified. And I also grew up in a poor family, and I didn't know how we would make it with me trying to go to college. So, but I know that, again, when I went to college, as Dr. Kargas was sharing, that was a time where there was so much more available, like the Pell Grants. That's how I went. I went on some scholarships and Pell Grants, and that got me through school. I'm so grateful for that. But, you know, why in the world have we decreased those opportunities for young people to go to college? Dr. Kargas, did you want to comment on that?
Well, the trend really changed in the 70s and 80s, that none of us will be surprised that, you know, Ronald Reagan is quoted in the movie of saying, you know, all these undeserving people are getting financial aid. Where did that come from? Where did that, you know, data come from? In the author who wrote Bowling Alone, Robert Putnam's new book, he said, you know, we were a very we society. Right after World War II, we spent a lot of money on college education, and the government poured a lot of money into higher education. And then in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, we started to say, no, people should figure that out on themselves. People need to figure out a tuition on their own. And that really changed how we invested and how we viewed college experience.
We have Mary Singleton with her hand raised to respond to that question as well.
Mary, we're unable to hear you.
Mary, it looks like you're on mute. Let me try to unmute you. Okay, so go ahead. It's not working.
While we're working to see if we can help Mary to find her voice, I'm gonna, just to rephrase a topic earlier, this is a question again for you, Dr. Kargas. Do you think we are making students pay extra for the basic resources they need to survive college?
I'm not exactly sure what the question is asking, but living expenses have gone up. Everything has gone up. Transportation has gone up. Tuition has gone up. The cost of books, the cost of food, the cost of rent. Some cities more than others, but the cost of living has gone up, and the research is showing that's what students don't have enough money for. Financial aid is not covering, and interestingly enough, when we interview students, the first thing to go is nutritious food. They've got to pay a bill. They've got to pay a doctor's bill. They've got to buy a book. And they skip on good food.
Mhm. Well, and I will share too, working at the Food Depot and with the food banks, we see that too with low-income families. We know that when they have a limited income, many of them are working 2 and 3 part-time jobs just to try and make ends meet. We know that they take the money they get and they pay for those fixed expenses first. So they have to pay the rent to keep a roof over their head. They have to keep their car in working order and fuel, those kinds of things. And we find that what they frequently share with us is that whatever money is left over, they can use that for food. And rarely is there money left over. And we also know that a lot of low-income families, they live paycheck to paycheck. We've heard a lot about that, and the fact that by living paycheck to paycheck, that means that one small unexpected expense, like a flat tire, may wipe out your food budget for the week or 2 weeks until you're paid again. So that's something I think that all hungry New Mexicans are encountering quite a lot. So another question that I'll go ahead and offer to you, Dr. Karges, is in working to improve food security on college campuses, how important do you think it is to focus on bigger issues like college tuition costs? For example, fighting for universal tuition-free college.
I think that's super important. And it was in the New York Times today that Biden is talking about free community college. So that certainly is a step in the right direction. But it's a lot more than tuition, right? I mean, students need a living wage. These are our students who are all working at restaurants and minimum wage jobs that don't pay enough for them to get by, even if they had free tuition. Books are expensive. Student fees is another cost. So I wonder if we couldn't look at student fees have skyrocketed, examining what that money goes to and why couldn't some of that go for food and shelter?
Well, and the next question, again, for you, Dr. Karges, given the disturbingly high level of food insecurity on campuses in New Mexico, has any attention been given to including breakfast and dinner with payment of half-time or greater tuition, thus treating food like healthcare and providing insurance to cover it? Those who don't want or need the food provided would lower the cost of providing food to all students.
I love that idea. And no, that is a radical idea in higher education that we absolutely have to contemplate. There's a national college food bank organization, and they've got a guide, and they tell students how to fundraise, how to go to your local church, how do you, to go to Greek Life and raise funds. That's crazy. That's not the way to solve, I mean, it's important and we're doing it, but really we need to do something like that. Offer students a hot meal. What if we offered every student every day one hot meal?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And our next question, I'll go back to you, Dr. Karges, too. It says, I teach financial literacy courses for college students and adults. I have found that many people overspend on food eaten out because they don't know how to cook or prepare even basic foods like a tuna sandwich. Should we go back to teaching basic home economics or cooking in school?
Absolutely. I have a graduate nutrition student here with us tonight, Anna Leon, and she's doing research with me and is proposing cooking classes on our website. She volunteers at the pantry and finds students come from different backgrounds, and they may not know what to do with a box of pasta or understand the cooking requirements and combining different things, and that peanut butter is more nutritious than something else. But for college students, it's hard to cook when they're super busy. So we also need things like offering hot food or letting SNAP benefits be used for hot food.
Well, and I keep going back to the low-income families that the food banks and food pantries help in New Mexico, and they encounter some of the same things. Sometimes they go for what is very inexpensive and, of course, what is convenient. They're not, again, working 2 or 3 part-time jobs. They're raising their children. Their children are active with school and after school. And of course, with part-time jobs, you don't always know what your schedule will be. So they go for whatever is inexpensive and whatever is convenient. And oftentimes that means going through a McDonald's drive-through or something like that. So I know that that's something that the food banks are considering in trying to provide free meals that are nutritious, hot, but still convenient and easy to access for them.
Yeah, I mean, right now, the food on campus at the sub is fast food, right? So anything, there's hardly anything nutritious at the sub. So when students need a hot meal or a fast meal, their options are really limited. So we also need universities to provide microwaves and kitchens. In my department, we have a sign on our kitchen, students may not enter. We need to change the mindset about access to a refrigerator and things.
Absolutely. And I know that with the Food Depot here, the food bank serving part of northern New Mexico, we're headquartered here in Santa Fe, and we work with the Santa Fe Community College on their campus covered food pantry. And they have done that where they have set up like a bookcase, and they put those kinds of items that a student can come by and grab really fast. They've set up a microwave so they can microwave something so they can have it hot. But that means they know if they have nothing to eat that day, they can run by there and grab something quick. So I think that's certainly something that the food banks can do to really start addressing some of the issues on food insecurity in college campuses. The next question for you, Doctor, is why aren't there more programs fighting food insecurity in college campuses, specifically UNM? And though they do exist, why don't many food insecure students use them? And why isn't this viewed as an emergency, though it clearly should be?
Well, I mean, that's one question. Is it an emergency? When something's been going on for so long and involves so many people, yes, on the one hand, it's definitely an emergency, but it's also a systemic problem that probably isn't going anywhere anytime soon. It's raising awareness. As faculty, I simply did not know. My students didn't tell me. They don't bring those sorts of problems to me in my academic courses. I teach about world hunger, ironically. I teach human rights. And for years and years, I've been teaching about world hunger, not knowing what was going on in my own classroom. So there is a huge amount of ignorance on the campus and in the state and in the nation and in the rich world. As you all, those of you that run the food pantries know as well, I'm sure. So we need to get the data out there. We need to get the message out there, get our posters up and going, and then have real programs. We don't have much at UNM. We have a small pantry, thanks to the hardworking staff women who have created it. That didn't come from the administration. We're just starting to chip away at them to say, the university has a responsibility. Because we don't talk about it, students don't know that it's a systemic problem. It's not their fault for being food insecure. It's not their family's fault for being food insecure. There are thousands of students like them on campus. So that's starting to change the message.
Well, here's an idea that has come up in the chat, and it says, is there a program through which volunteers in the community can adopt a student to provide 3 meals a week, grocery gift cards for food, etc.? Dr. Kargas, are you aware of a program like that at UNM or any of the other universities? I haven't heard of it either.
There are some, adopt an international student. International students turn out to have a high rates of food insecurity. They can't work. They don't have families to turn to nearby often, but that's a great idea, and I'll write it down. The provost has put together a steering committee. We are gathering all these ideas, but gift cards are a great thing to contemplate. And we need to think about putting gift cards in the student centers, the various where students do feel more comfortable going. But gift cards give students choice, and they can buy culturally appropriate food. They can buy, they can make their own choices. So I think we need a movement of how to collect and pass out gift cards.
And I couldn't agree more. We're working at the food banks. We're always working with food pantries, the food pantries we serve, to set up client's choice pantries. And it's just, honestly, it's just a more dignified and respectful way to help people. Yeah. And that's the same with the gift cards that allows them to go in and choose what's right for them. But again, I think that there's work to be done with our food pantries to do the same thing.
I'm going to have you ladies pause for a second. Let's see if we can get Mary Singleton to come through. At this point, she has her hand back up. Maybe something has resolved over there.
Oh,
Doesn't work. Why? Okay, we'll get back to Mary, see if we can troubleshoot that some more. I think this speaks a little bit to the digital divide. Mary is joining us from Truchas. I know that's another piece of the conversation about access and education for students as well. But Sherry, go ahead.
all right. We know in the film, for those who were able to view it before this, in the film, it was highlighted that the food served on campuses was related to multi-million-dollar contracts with for-profit food corporations and often related to food items being overpriced. Is this being addressed in a meaningful way? And if not, how can it be? And I have to share, when I watched the documentary, I was taken aback at, I think they said it may have been $18 billion profits for these food companies that provide this food service to college campuses. Dr. Kargas?
I don't think it is being addressed. I think it's, again, one of these hidden problems that needs to surface and needs to be addressed. I have met with our head of food, the corporate food and UNM food. These are people who think about food and care about students, and they're looking for ways too, but there's limits. It's a profit-making entity. And someone in the film mentioned, I don't know if they mentioned it by name, but Swipe Out Hunger. And Swipe Out Hunger was a program started by a college student saying, there's all these unused meal points on my card. Now, I was told that the university or the food service counts on that in their profit making, but we should still push that movement for our students. And we don't have it on campus. We've barely begun to talk about anything at UNM, which is, the positive thing is it's a curve that can go up, only up now, but we should have a Swipe Out hunger program where students can give away their meal points. There are roadblocks, there's politics, there's a lot to do. We should do a food recovery network on campus. They have text programs where students tell each other, where people report free food. A meeting is ending, come get the leftover bagels or whatever. And then in the film, they talked about food recovery around the city to, all of that takes coordination and time and effort. And really what universities need is a point person to implement these things. And right now we don't have such a point person.
Well, and I know there are food banks in the United States that do work around food rescue, which is really going into picking up from restaurants, corporate cafeterias, banquet halls, those kinds of things. And when I worked with the food bank in Kansas City, we did have a program that did that. And I will say that it is a good program because it prevents that food waste and gets that food to people who really need it. It's a very expensive program. And so if you're looking at, not only do you have to figure out how to collect all of that food in a safe way, because it's all highly perishable food, but there's also the part about what do you do with it once you get it? And sometimes the food banks would normally then take it directly to a homeless shelter or domestic violence shelter or a place where the food would be repurposed or heated up and served. If you don't have those kinds of opportunities, then you're faced with, do you set up the kitchen at the college to repurpose that food, freeze those meals and make it available to students, for example? So there's a lot that goes into that. I also will point out that the food banks do a lot of food rescue, especially with grocery stores, for example, with their deli foods and all of those things. So a lot of that is already actually being taken care of. Can we stop for just a moment and bring in the other food banks? I just want to make sure that they're available to help answer some of these questions that come up, if we could. And while we're doing that, I'll go ahead and for you, Dr. Kargas, again, what are some of the best ways to open up dialogues about food insecurity in the classroom? Should new student orientation sessions include campus food pantry resources as a means to de-shame this need? That's a good idea too.
Yeah, absolutely. So new student orientation, some universities, they make the pantry part of the food, part of the tour. When you're showing students around campus, show them the pantry. And also get faculty to talk about it. We have to do a lot of training as faculty for sexual harassment, active shooter training. How to handle chemicals. We've got tons of trainings on campus. Why not have a training on basic needs insecurity to make faculty aware, and also make faculty aware of the resources on campus? There's a movement to put something on your syllabus. We put mental health resources on the syllabus. We put other things on the syllabus. We should mention the pantry and come to, let us know when there's problems.
All right, the next one for you as well is, what is the university college administration response to hearing that there is a hunger issue on campus? I mean, are they open to addressing it, or is the inclination to deny that it exists to make the university or college not seem unappealing?
There's probably a little both going on. The university absolutely responded to our data. They helped fund the project. We need money for student incentives. We convinced students to take surveys by giving them food certificates. And so the university has been responsive. It immediately set up a task force. But we're really good at just talking. It takes a while to get the university to invest. Right now, our food pantry doesn't have running water, plumbing, refrigeration. We need to move the food pantry. So there's discussion about that. We've been talking for close to a year now. So I have to learn patience, but the university is responding. I've written to a lot of administrators asking them for money for our next round of study this coming April, and they've all responded, offering some funds. There's a lot of goodwill among the staff. Everybody we talk to says, how can I help? It hasn't turned into real huge money yet, but there's a huge amount of staff concern and faculty concern. So that's reassuring.
The next question here is, my concern is about the part that the faculty plays in helping students find food resources. Doesn't every student have a faculty advisor? Are they able to help the students where they really need help? And again, this kind of, you've answered this a bit, but I don't know, you may have other comments you'd like to make.
No, students, I'm not involved in advising more than sort of casual. We have professional advisors throughout the university. So we need to inform everybody. One of the things that Megan's class is doing is making posters for staff and faculty to educate them about the problem. A student in a focus group told me the financial aid person absolutely didn't even believe how bad my situation is. They didn't believe that I had no one to turn to. So we have to, at all levels, help people see. And that's why I think the film is really good. It's one thing for me as a researcher to tell the administrators what we're finding, but it's far more powerful when it comes from student voice. We need a major education campaign.
What I'd like to do now is introduce my colleagues at New Mexico Food Banks. And if you would just take a minute to just share the work that you're doing at your food bank to address hunger on the college campuses. I'll start with Mag Stripmatter. Mag is the president and CEO of the Roadrunner Food Bank. Welcome, Mag.
Well, welcome, thank you. And I say thank you in large term about this topic. This is a secret that can't be a secret anymore. And I appreciate, Dr. Kargas, what you're doing to really put some emphasis on this and the dialogue must continue. So thank you, and thank you to Food Depot and New Mexico First. So Roadrunner Food Bank has been involved in partnering with various colleges and universities. Our longest partnership goes back, actually, I think my colleague Diana Sprague will be surprised to hear. Back in 2013, we started working with the Roswell campus of Eastern New Mexico University. And we have an ongoing mobile food pantry there with that campus in Chavez County. So that's the longest partnership that we've had with respect to doing pantry service and partnerships on campuses. At UNM, of course, we started a mobile food pantry, which is where we come up with the ability to distribute the boxes, et cetera. Especially now with COVID, that's also another compounding issue that we've all had to deal with. The distribution is different. It used to be that it was more of self-select going through those mobile food pantries. So until COVID abates and we can get back to having more of that choice, the client choice, which Sherry mentioned, which is so important. So, and then we started the pantry back in 2018. And right now they're doing the boxes of COVID as well, or boxes of food because of COVID. New Mexico State University, we partner with Aggie Cupboard since 2018, and we do a mobile food pantry there. And then also there is that pantry, the cupboard itself. And then at Western University over in Grant County, we have a pantry that we've brought online back in April of 2019. CNM, we've partnered with them since March of 2015, doing a mobile food pantry as well. And then also Doña Ana Community College. We serve 2 branches of the community college down in Las Cruces area. And then also Sunland Park opened an additional location where students of DACC are welcome to come to their mobile in Sunland Park to receive food too. So we have programs right now in 4 different counties: Bernalillo, Doña Ana, Grants, and Chavez. But as always, we're wanting and happy to do more, whatever we can do to add more. And of course, what helps make that happen is money and resources, which is right back to Dr. Cargus's point about resource. It takes resource but collaboration and partnership too. So thank you, Sherry. I appreciate the opportunity.
As we move on to our next partner here, I just want to draw your attention to the chat. There is a list of the college food pantries in New Mexico in the chat there. There's a link. We will also be sending that to you in an email on follow-up.
I'd like to talk to Diana Sprague, who is the Executive Director of the Food Bank of Eastern New Mexico. Diana, would you like to share a little bit about what your food bank is doing to address college hunger? Oops. We cannot hear you, unfortunately, Diana. I don't know.
Okay, how about now?
Yes. Win.
Hi everyone, Diana Sprague with the Food Bank of Eastern New Mexico, located here in Clovis, New Mexico, on the eastern side of the state. Our nearest college campus is Eastern New Mexico University. Last year, and this has always been a struggle, was having of like an ongoing food pantry just in Roosevelt County itself. We had a partnership with the church, and that ended up falling through last year. So we all, put on our sneakers and went down to Portales last year, every first, third, and fifth Friday. And we have a mobile, or actually it's mobile food pantry, a drive-through food pantry, probably about 100 feet away from Eastern New Mexico University. And yes, we do see a lot of college students that come through, but here it's like particularly heartbreaking because a lot of the college students at Eastern are active duty military. And so that is compounded with, you have these young men and women wanting to serve their country, go to school, and it's tough. It's tough to make those ends meet. So we have that. We have a SNAP outreach coordinator. So she works with Eastern New Mexico University and Clovis Community College here to particularly target those students to make sure she can take away the stigma of, signing up for food stamps. She does a lot of education around the SNAP program, particularly here recently because SNAP has changed so much and the benefits on there have increased so much just within the last year. And Dr. Cargus, I applaud you because you touched it on something earlier about how international students are greatly affected. And we saw this last April when classes at Eastern just suddenly stopped, and you had all of these international students that did not have the benefit, or the cafeteria itself closed. So they didn't have the benefit to go to the cafeteria. They didn't have a way to go to a grocery store. In Portales, your nearest grocery store is a couple of miles away. There's not public transit. So yeah, you hit on something that was really important last year, that we had to step in and try to figure out how we take care of those students. So anyway, I feel like you've blown the lid off of something that we haven't talked about and we need to be talking about.
Absolutely. Thank you, Diana. It's my pleasure next to introduce Nanette Pickney, who is with the Executive Director of ECHO, Inc., which has many programs, but has the food bank in Farmington. Welcome, Nanette.
Hi, thanks, Sherry. And thank you, Sherry and Dr. Hargis, for this presentation. It's very eye-opening. And I think if there's anything that the food banks have learned over this last year with, seeking funding for our programs, is education is key. From every aspect possible, from our state leadership to our staff, to each other, to community members, partners. So I think that I saw in one of the chats, someone mentioned about including education and orientation. And I think that's really important. And even if the campus doesn't have a program, perhaps just education about what is available in the community, if nothing else. As far as the ECHO Food Bank goes, we work with the San Juan College here in Farmington. And during the pandemic, they did choose to stop the program. So we've just started conversations with them again. But I think in addition to the education, the other piece that's going to be really important for us as we move forward is working on the stigma, because there's stigma for everything. I mean, one of the things I worked on a lot in Texas before I moved here was stigma with mental health. I mean, that ties in with food insecurity as well, and being embarrassed to ask for help. So I really liked the slide that showed the flyers and the different ways to address that in such a tactful way that doesn't really make you feel ashamed for asking for help. So I really like that. And I think that's something I really want to focus on too with the college as we start our discussions back up and restart that program. And as far as working with local restaurants, I think that's a great idea. I saw that in the chat as well. And I've seen some kind of innovative programs, not necessarily here, but in the New York area. I think it was a pizza place that you could pay it forward. So if someone came in and bought a piece of pizza, they could pay for a piece of pizza for someone else. And there was a wall, and it would just have a pizza on there, and you could just grab it and take it up to the register and pay for it. I think, working with local restaurants to do something like that, especially the ones that are local and not chains, is a really great idea. And especially ones located closer to the campuses, so it's not so far for the students to go. So those are some takeaways for me. And I'm really looking forward to getting our program restarted with the college and looking on how we can implement some of these things that have been discussed today.
Thank you, Nanette. And lastly, Hilda Kindle is with us. I didn't realize she had joined us. She's with the Community Pantry in Gallup, and she has just stepped away from her desk. So I'm going to go back to a question, and this is back to Dr. Kargas. If we average citizens want to make an impact in increasing the attention being given by university and college administrators, not just to the hunger present among college students on their campuses, but to effectively mitigating and reducing hunger among the students on their campuses. Do you have suggestions of how we can do that when we rarely, if ever, cross the paths of those administrators?
Oh, that's a great question. There's usually college newspapers. So writing to the college newspaper or a college editorial, writing to the president, writing to the provost. They care what the community thinks. So I think writing to people, making your voices heard matters. Also, we have to keep influencing legislators. That's they play an important role too in the education.
And we know that Representative Ferrari out of the Las Cruces area introduced House Bill 133, which would provide $100,000, I believe, to the higher education department to look at a pilot program that would help address college hunger. And the bill was tabled, but actually, I believe Representative Ferrari had access. She has an allocation of funds, and she's able to put those funds towards this pilot program. So I'm excited to see what happens with that. And I'm hopeful, of course, Dr. Kargas, that you're available to help with that, because with the research you've done, it's amazing what's come out with that. Thank you so much.
And I just want to say that Representative Stansberry was a sponsor and is also putting her budget towards the tabled bill too.
Thank you. And I'm going to do one more very quick question. And this is opened up to Dr. Kargas and to the food banks. Is there any demographic in New Mexico that does not suffer from food insecurity?
Oh, sure, rich old white people.
Absolutely not.
I was muted. I'm
Hear you now.
I think hunger touches everybody.
Mm-hmm. And Mary, now that we can hear you, did you want to share your comments before we close?
Well, I got it on the chat about the faculty. I think faculty is key. When I was a graduate student and student in the 50s, the faculty are really the people you go to with these issues, or should. They should know each of their students they're advising, and they should find out what that situation is. Thank you.
I do want to put a shout out for student services staff, that there is an army of staff who are aware of these problems and are on the front lines. We have a whole Lobo Respect office that deals with these things. So the staff are not unaware. But I think now, because the amount of staff we've employed has skyrocketed compared to faculty hires, that faculty are at a remove in a way that staff are not. So we need to keep educating the faculty for sure.
Thank you, Dr. Kargas. And to our food bank representatives, does anyone want to take that? Diana answered that last question a little bit. Does anyone else have comments on that? Is there any demographic in New Mexico that is not touched by hunger? I think that silence gives us our answer, doesn't it? I don't believe that there is. Well, to close, I want to thank Dr. Kargas for the work you've done to identify the student needs on the UNM campus. And thank you too for joining us this evening to help us understand and respond to the problem of food insecurity among college students in New Mexico. And to our audience, thank you to our viewers for joining us this evening. We hope that you are better informed after seeing the documentary Hungry to Learn, and that you've learned a lot from our discussion tonight. For those of you who haven't seen the film Hungry to Learn, it's still available free and on demand through Sunday at the link provided in the Zoom chat. We invite you to join us in our work to end hunger in New Mexico. If you were moved by the film or the discussion tonight, please take action at Hungry to Learn page, which is at thefooddepot.org. And again, there's a link in the Zoom chat. But again, take a moment to take action. That's the most important thing. It's good to be educated, but it's the action that counts. Thank you for joining us this evening from the Food Depot and our partners, New Mexico First and Presbyterian Health Services. Thank you all. And a very quick thank you to our planning committee. They were marvelous, and they kept us all moving along this evening so superbly. So thank you to the planning committee. Everyone, thank you very much for your interest in learning more about hunger in New Mexico, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.